Now, I've never talked about Bell & Ross on my channel because I've always heard people say that, they're overpriced, they're too big. And so I just kind of never gave them a real thought, which is not fair. But when Bell & Ross reached out and asked me if I was interested in checking out their new watch, their BR03, now offered in a smaller case size, I thought, well, okay, this will give me a chance to kind of make my own analysis about the brand. Again, don't listen to what I have to say. You don't have to believe anything that anybody else says. You have to make your own assessment. This is me just sharing my assessment. Now, Bell & Ross did not sponsor this video. They didn't pay me. Of course, they wouldn't pay me. And they also didn't have any say in this video. But what they did do is answer a few questions that I asked them, and they lent me 2 of their watches for me to be able to make this video. So let's talk about it. Today with me, I have the new Bell & Ross BR03. This new version comes in a new size, a new dial, and a new movement. So a lot of things to unpack here, including how it wears and why it's as expensive as it is. Right, so let's start with the history. Bell & Ross is a French brand founded in 1992 by 2 friends, Bruno Bellamic, who was the head of design, and Carlos Rosillo, who ran the operation side of the business. Their plan was to create proper tool watches, tough enough to be used in the most extreme environments. We're talking Air Force pilots, diving commandos, astronauts, and special forces. But Bell & Ross cannot be talked about without also mentioning the German watchmaker Sinn, because the first Bell & Ross watches were made in Germany with the help of Sinn. Not long after the inception of the company, the brand proved its worth by breaking world records and manufacturing reliable watches for the likes of the elite bomb disposal unit of the French security services, the GIGN. Bell & Ross is not a fashion brand. They're tough, well-built tool watches that, because of their strong case construction, their comfortable wrist presence, and legible dial layouts, are trusted enough to be worn by military professionals. And this is why I always say that 2 different watches from 2 different watch brands can have the exact same movement inside, but they can be priced very differently. Because one of those brands might not be doing the level of testing, the level of case construction to the extreme detail that the other brand may be. Case design and construction, especially when it's a tailor-made case, when it's unorthodox design, those cost a lot of money. Those cases are, in fact, sometimes much more expensive than the movement itself. I'm not saying this is the case with Bell & Ross, but this is just kind of a general thing to know in the watch world. In 1998, Chanel bought stakes in the company, and 4 years later, Bell & Ross departed from Sinn entirely and moved its manufacturing to Switzerland, where they now have full access to Chanel's fine watchmaking facilities. Now let's talk about this new watch. The BR03 follows the iconic design language of the BR01, which was launched in 2005, giving the brand its strong design identity, unlike anything else out there. A simple, legible design, but highly complex in terms of its engineering. The dials also express this concept of functionality and perfect legibility with highly contrasted numerals and hands. Even though Bell & Ross gives this design a modern touch, the hands and indices are inspired by airplane dashboard instruments. Powering these watches are third-party movements from the likes of Sellita. And these movements, in my opinion, are the best options for this kind of watch. They've been around for the longest time. They're robust, they're reliable, and easily serviceable. Complex movements with decorated bridges and complications wouldn't really suit the purpose of this watch. Now let's talk about the specs. The watch comes in a 41mm stainless steel case, lug-to-lug of 50mm, and a slim height of just 9.65mm. which is incredible considering that this watch has an automatic movement. You get a flat sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating, protecting the dial and 100 meters of water resistance, but without a screw-down crown. While the case has a gorgeous radially brushed finish along with linear brushed finishing on the sides and the back, there are prominent touches of polishing around the edges that give this watch that luxurious versatility that it deserves, especially for the price. The copper dial is created using a galvanization process and has a vertically brushed finish. You have a small round matching date window with a step frame at the 4:30 position. Contrast to the dial are embossed black numerals and indices filled with black varnish, which means that legibility will not be an issue. You get heated blue loomed hands, and although the lume on this particular reference is very minimal, it's surprisingly bright. Overall, the attention to detail is impressive. Even under macro, you don't really see any imperfections when it comes to finishing. The calf leather brown strap is super soft and has a very premium feel to it. Behind the satin finished steel case back beats an upgraded automatic caliber, the BR302, and offers a higher power reserve of 54 hours. You get quick set date function, hacking seconds hand, and manual wind. And while the fact that this model doesn't come with a screw-down crown may understandably be a point of contention for many, it makes sense to have that feature reserved for the more serious tool watches like the professional divers. Think about it. People that don't really use that feature, people that don't really swim with their watches, they might not really enjoy the screwing and unscrewing of the crown every 2 days just to adjust the time or wind the crown. It just becomes a bit of a hassle on a day-to-day basis. So not saying that that isn't necessary, but for this watch, which is more of a dressier Bell & Ross BR03, it's not necessary for this reference. Now, the previous generation BR03 came in a 42mm case, and the new one comes in a 41mm case, a difference of just 1mm. That doesn't seem newsworthy. And Bell & Ross knew that that's what we might think, which is why they also sent me the 42mm version just to kind of do a side-by-side comparison, especially when it comes to the wearability. And honestly, I was surprised to see how much difference of just 1mm makes in a square watch. While the previous generation BR03 would wear way too big, this new version actually fits surprisingly well on my 6.23-inch wrist. Because of its slim profile, it can hide under a cuff for sure. But this watch does have a wrist presence, a very strong wrist presence. But the fact that they've trimmed it down and still managed to fit the movement without compromising the overall proportionality and the dial layout is impressive. The new BR0341 retails for about $3,600. So this was a question that I asked them point blank because I knew that everybody is thinking the same thing. Why are Bell & Ross watches expensive? And they gave me 4 reasons. The first one being a unique case construction. So like I said before, having not just a unique shape, but also the fact that this case has to be strong, has to be shock resistant, and has to be finished to a high level. All of these things cost money. The second factor is the movement assembly. So just because this watch has the base Sellita SW300 movement, it doesn't mean that they just plopped the movement inside the case and shut the case and sold the watches. They told me that their watchmakers had to completely disassemble the movements, modify them, and then reassemble them in a slimmer size. Otherwise, they wouldn't fit in this. The third point is group structure versus independent. Now, Bell & Ross is not exactly an independent watch brand. They do have backing from Chanel, but it is still a small family-owned company. And even though it's backed by Chanel, it's not the same as being part of, let's say, Richemont or the Swatch Group. The supply chain, getting access to parts, getting access to movements, everything, it's not as easy as being part of those brands. And then finally, the fourth point is the quality. And this is one thing that Bell & Ross is very confident about, and you'll know that as soon as you hold one of their watches in your hand. The quality is impeccable. we may not see the quality checks that happen behind the scene, but to get to this level of quality and make them to the point where they're good enough to be used by those professional bodies, there are things happening behind the scenes that we might not know about, which adds to the cost. Anyway, let me know in the comments below, what do you think about Bell & Ross? Also, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.